Okay, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, or happy Thursday if you're in New Zealand, as a couple of people are. Welcome. We're so pleased to have Richard back. CJ, I don't know which address on your screen. I have a slide up right now. It's just our welcome slide. And I'm going to flip past that. And I am recording this session so that if for some reason you need to leave and you would like to watch this presentation to Richard's speech at a later time, I'll be sending out the recording later today. For those, okay, Richard is very quiet. So Richard, you need to speak up a little bit. Well, Richard's not talking right now, it's just me. So, and I have my microphone turned up because apparently I was breaking up. So anyway, so just quickly, an agenda. If you're new to any meeting, this is the meeting software that we use. And really, there's just a couple of things that you need to know. If you need to leave at any time, just close your browser off. As I said, I am recording this. And if you are here today, you'll get an email with a link to that recording so that you can watch it at your leisure. The way that the audience, can interact with each other is through the chat feature. You probably have that little message chat box up on your screen now, and you can see people typing into it. So if you want to give that a try right now, you just put your mouse cursor in the box where it says type your message here, and you can type a message. And if it says sent to everyone, that means that you're sending to the entire audience, including the presenters. So watch what you say. There's also the option to send to the presenters, who are Richard and I, and also just to send to each of us individually if you want to private message us. So if you want to give that a try now, you can just type in a message and say hello to everybody. Other than that, if you are experiencing some audio or video difficulties, it could be the internet connection, and by that I mean my internet connection or your internet connection or Richard's. If you are plugged straight into the wall with your internet, your connection will be better than if you are depending on Wi-Fi, generally speaking. Also, you should try and close down any other programs that you have running in the background on your computer, such as Facebook or other programs that are using up your computer's resources. Other than that, I found out yesterday that one reason that this AnyMeeting package that we use, I like it because it's simple, it's easy to get into. It doesn't require you to download any software in order to use it. But the payoff for that is that sometimes our quality is not as good. So that's something I discovered yesterday. Okay, so that's about it for using AnyMeeting. Now, our next meeting, I have a big question mark next to that. For July, I'm actually going to be on vacation for half the month, the later half of the month. So even though Alzheimer's doesn't take a vacation, I'm afraid I'm going to be taking one next month. So our next meeting will be in August. Richard and I are going to talk about the topic. I've been leaving it open because my hope is that our next To Whom I May Concern video production will be ready for viewing in August. We have a group of 5 people working on it right now, all contributing their words of wisdom to it. Maureen will be starting to write a script. She also is on vacation in August as well, so I'm not quite sure how that's all going to work out. But stay posted. We will have a new production on a totally new theme than the first one, which was the real world of Alzheimer's. And we have a great group, and I'm really excited about it. For the fall of 2013, right now I'm busy lining up speakers, and now that Richard is back, we will be coordinating on that as well. September 2013 is our 1-year anniversary of the Meeting of the Minds, so we have to do something to celebrate. It's also World Alzheimer's Month, so World Dementia Awareness Month. So yeah, we have to do something extra special for that. Anyways, you'll be getting updates and emails when we have the new speaker lineup for the fall. Okay, here's the part that is hard to address for me, but it has to be done. I want to thank, first of all, the people who have donated on our website, mindsmeeting.com. There's a donate button. And enough was donated to pay for the last 3 months of any meeting. So thank you so much. Right now, we're completely self-funded. And anything that you can donate, $1 per person keeps us going for a month. So if everybody here contributed $1, that pays for the any meeting subscription and the website hosting. And that's amazing. So thank you to everybody. Please keep it up. If you go to themindsmeeting.com and you'll be redirected there after this webinar, you can click on the donate button and it goes through PayPal. Any amount, $1, $2, $5. And what that does is it keeps this webinar free for everybody. Because there are people who genuinely can't afford, and if they did have to pay for this, they wouldn't be able to come. So if you consider this to be a terrific educational resource, if you're sharing it with other people, and if you're enjoying it, please consider contributing just a few dollars to help keep us going. The other thing that we're going to start doing, too, is we're going to start asking people to donate their time. Richard and I have talked about this recently. There's quite a lot of administrative tasks and publicity that go on in the background behind the meetings. And we're going to be contacting you all shortly to see how we can all pull together and help to make a meeting of the minds even bigger and a better resource than ever. We are a community here. That's one way that I like to think that this webinar is different from other educational offerings, is that we're a community, and I think that's why people keep coming back. When you come back here every month, you see friends. You see their names on a list. I know I see friends on a list, and I'm so happy to see you here, and I really feel like I'm connected into a community. So it's a community effort, and let's see how we can all pull together as a community. PayPal absolutely does work for us, and there's a PayPal button on the website. Thank you, Tina. Okay, so enough preaching, and on to Richard. The agenda said to introduce Richard, but Richard really needs very little introduction. Richard, how many years ago were you diagnosed with something that could possibly be Alzheimer's, the dementia?
10 years.
It is 10 years now. Okay. Right. I met Richard in 2008. First I read his book, and to say that he's had a profound impact on my life would be to minimize the impact that he's had on my life. He changed everything that I ever thought about Alzheimer's and dementia, and he's been my partner in crime on various projects ever since. And I'm so glad that he's back. And he's here to tell us about his experiences in the hospital. And you know, should we be surprised? Ever since he's been out of the hospital, he's already been busy speaking. He did a radio show or a TV show talking about dementia, the experience of having dementia in the hospital. So nothing could keep him down, and I'm so pleased to have him here. So without further ado, Richard, I'm going to hand it over to you. And you know what? I'm actually going to turn off my camcorder and mute my microphone so that you have the full screen. Would that be okay, Richard? Or do you want me to stay up here?
No, I could use the full screen because I have my slides to hold up.
Oh, okay. Richard's going low tech. He's going to hold up his slides to the screen. Yeah. So, okay. All right. So I'll come back at the end here.
This is my agenda. I've called this Richard Goes Under. I'll talk a little bit about myself, what's going on with me, and then I want to talk about delirium and dementia, and about anesthesia, and if I can move this the right way.
Yeah, you need just to hold it up a little higher there. Okay, great.
It's one of those things where you move counterintuitively. So that's what I'm going to do. Greetings, my name is Richard Taylor. I have been living with the diagnosis and the symptoms of dementia for about 10 years now. Last November, I had trouble swallowing, and it hurt more and more for me to swallow. And finally I went and had one of those things where they stick down your throat, and a week later I was in 3 months of chemotherapy and 3 months of radiation therapy because I have esophageal cancer. It's a very aggressive and virulent form of cancer. About 10,000 people a year get it, and about 7,000 people a year die from it. After I finished my 3 months of chemotherapy and radiation therapy, I got a month off to get fat because I was going to undergo a very serious surgery called Ivers-Lewis. What they essentially do is take out your esophagus, create a new esophagus out of your stomach, cut the muscles at the bottom of your stomach and the bottom and the top of your intestines so that food just flows from your mouth right straight through your stomach into your small intestine, and throw away your old esophagus. This was me. This was me laying in the. Where am I laying? Whatever they call that place you go to right after you've had an operation. I had 6 tubes in me and coming out of me at the same time. This was me sitting up for the first time. I spent 10 days in the hospital. That's a lot of time in the hospital. And my surgery was 10 hours long. And these days, that's an enormous amount of time to spend under and in surgery. So how am I doing now? I'm still plagued by fatigue. I'm all healed. I'm learning to adjust to a new way of eating. I have to eat smaller amounts. And there's some foods that when I eat are very difficult on me. I have a symptom. You get a symptom from this surgery called dumping, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's an onomatopoetic title. And when you do, it drains all the fluids out of your body, all the electrolytes out of your body, and it takes you 2 days or 3 days to recover from it. And since I get 1 or 2 of these a week, I have good days and bad days, I should say. Now, what am I doing? I feel like a half gallon of ice cream that's had 3 scoops taken out of it. My cover looks okay. The top looks okay. When you pick it up, it's a little light. I've lost about 30 pounds as a result of the surgeries and my recovery period. I was losing 1 pound a day for a while. So how I'm doing is I'm fatigued. I'm tired. I sleep 11, 12 hours a day still. They tell me it'll take 3 months to a year to get over this, that this is such a shock to your body. I'm having some heart problems now. When you have a surgery this long and you leave your body open and you move the heart around a little bit, the heart gets pissed off. So I'm having some arrhythmia, you know what I'm talking, rhythm problems with my heart, afibrile something and something else, where one side of my heart, 2 sides are not beating in sync with each other. So sometimes they both open at the same time, sometimes they both close at the same time. So that's not good. And they claim that it's just a matter of time until my heart stops being PO'd at me and goes back to beating correctly. But that time hasn't arrived yet. And so it's a little scary. I've been to the emergency room and a 3-day stay in the hospital waiting for a heart attack, and it never came. So I just live each day just like I always did, I guess, one day at a time. Now, what am I doing? I'm doing less than I used to do, I must confess. I don't have the focus or energy. Like I told you, I'm missing 2 scoops. I find when I try to remember things, it's a mishmash. I get the peaks, but not the rest of the mountain and the valley. And so I end up talking about peaks, and I get them in the wrong order and at the wrong height, and in the wrong place at the wrong time. So it's much more challenging for my family to understand me, but we're making it. Now, going to the hospital. I knew I was going to the hospital a month in advance. And I had heard of what people said about delirium and about Alzheimer's and dementia and anesthesia. So I made an appointment to go see my anesthesiologist. Well, it turns out it wasn't my anesthesiologist. It was simply a nurse practitioner, anesthesia practitioner, nurse anesthesiologist, I guess is what you'd call her. Who wasn't necessarily mine. She just answered questions for the anesthesia department. The hospital I chose was ranked number 9 in the country. So I was in the 9th best hospital, according to U.S. News and World Report. And the answers I got from her about how they dealt with people who had dementia and what protocols did they have, what did they do differently, and what did nursing do differently, excuse me, were very unsettling to me, unsatisfactory. So I called the head of the anesthesia department at Methodist Hospital, which is where I went. And he actually empathized with me, but told me his hands were tied because they had a contract with a group of anesthesiologists, and that group was responsible for those kinds of things, so I should talk to them. So I called the head of that group. He told me not to worry, they were going to take good care of me. And that seems to be the byword for people in anesthesiology. They pat you on the leg and say, don't worry, we're going to take good care of you. But if you have dementia, they don't tell you how they're going to take a different care of you in order to make it good than if you don't have dementia. And what it turns out is most anesthesiologists don't understand dementia. I'm not sure that they know, that they recognize it. And to talk about delirium and dementia is like talking to them in Latin and in Greek. Now, what about delirium and dementia? Delirium is much like dementia in that it is I have a lot of trouble now with nouns. It's a syndrome, that's the word. It's a collection, it's not a disease. It's a collection of symptoms, just like dementia is. And when you get enough people with the same symptoms, then you parse them off, and so you have people with Lewy body dementia and frontal lobe dementia and Alzheimer's disease and so on. And so delirium is a set of symptoms that are much like dementia, generalized dementia, Alzheimer's disease. You have trouble remembering, you're confused, sometimes you're insecure, sometimes you're panicky. Interestingly enough for me, one of the side effects of coming out of surgery was somewhere along the line, I had a panic attack. I could actually see my lungs I could see the tube they were taking out of my mouth, and I was running out of air, and I couldn't breathe. I think what happened is that when they remove my breathing tube, they usually say, all right, now, I want you to breathe hard. I want you to exhale hard. Now, let's just practice. I think I exhaled hard, and then I didn't inhale. And they said, all right, now exhale. And I just didn't have any air to exhale, and I couldn't inhale any air because they were pulling this damn thing out of my throat. And it's long. It's this long when they, it's even longer than the screen. It's this long when they pull it out. And I really had a panic attack then. My heart started to beat faster. I tried to get out of bed. And I had that panic feeling in me the whole time I was in the hospital. I had 5 other tubes in me that they had to take out of my lungs and my stomach and my chest, my nose. And I dreaded each one of those, and I was fearful for each one of those. And it turns out that each one came out very easily. I had no reason to panic about it. There was no fear-inducing anything with it, and they didn't even hurt. But that didn't stop me from being panicked about it. I attribute some of that to my dementia. So delirium is not dementia. Delirium is by definition short-term. About 60 to 80% of all older people who go in the hospital for almost anything experience deliria. Close to 90% of older people who go in the hospital and end up in intensive care end up with serious delirium, where there's some serious confusion about who they are, where they are, what's going on, and what's happening to them. Most of that disappears in 1 to 3 days. Some of it does not. In some people, it stays for a week. In some people, it stays for a month. And in other people, it stays with them the rest of their lives. There is some evidence from the Harvard Medical School that delirium facilitates dementia. That is, if you are delirious over a period of time, it increases the chances about 30% of you having dementia within the next 3 years. But that has not been proven yet. It's just been hinted at. So everybody says, well, there's some relationship between deliria and dementia, but we don't know what it is. Now, the human side of anesthesia. In most large hospitals, and for those of you who live in rural hospitals, I don't know what the situation is. For those of you who live in other countries, I'm not sure what your situation is. But my suspicion is that you use the same model that we do in the United States, and that is we have what amounts to Hessian anesthesiologists. That is, we have paid anesthesiologists who do not work for you. They work for a corporation, and that corporation has a contract with the hospital. Hospitals did this, first of all, as a way of avoiding some of the responsibility, because when an anesthesiologist makes a mistake, there are generally serious consequences to it. And secondly, because they couldn't keep enough anesthesiologists guaranteed of being busy all the time. And third, anesthesiologists themselves didn't want to take just one patient at a time. They wanted to take more than one patient at a time, so they could bill for 4 people at a time. So what happened was anesthesiologists banded together and formed corporations. Those corporations contracted with the hospital, provide anesthesiology services to the patients in the hospital. And what generally happens, at least in American hospitals, is an anesthesiologist comes in the room introduces themselves, asks you a few inane questions, pretends like they know everything there is to know about you. And none of those questions are, do you have dementia, by the way. Pats you on the leg and says, don't worry, we'll take care of you. And that's the last you see of your anesthesiologist, unless you catch a glance of him or her pushing a needle full of juice, probably propylene. That's what most people use now for anesthesia. And yes, that's what Michael Jackson misused and ended up in his death. They use propylene now because it has a half-life of about half of what other anesthesias do, so that doesn't, you don't spend so much time in intensive care. You come out of it very quickly, and you go into it very quickly. If you remember the old days of anesthesiology, there was kind of a fuzzy, cloudy period where you could feel yourself kind of fading away. With today's anesthesias, once that he starts to push that plunger and it gets in your blood system, you're out. You don't remember going under, you don't remember coming up, and you don't remember anything in between. In case you haven't noticed, I'm not an anesthesiologist, and I really can't give you medical advice about anesthesiology. But I can tell you what my personal opinion is and what I know about it. And what I know about it is that the traumatic moment in anesthesia is the very first 3 or 4 seconds when you go under. Because when you go under, your entire body relaxes. And this is just a shock to your heart, because your heart is all keyed up to help you stand up, help you be awake and alive. It's a key to your, I can't remember what the hell the organ is now. The one that creates the juice that goes into your bloodstream that makes your heart beat faster. I think it's your gallbladder, but I'm not sure. Anyway, these two organs have a few seconds to try to work things out between themselves as to what's really going on and what's appropriate. The brain has fallen asleep, so it's up to the few muscles that you have in your heart, not muscles in your heart, the few little brain stem cells you have in your heart to figure out what's really going on and what would be appropriate. During these few seconds, your body is at risk because it's not getting the blood pressure that it really needs. It hasn't adjusted quite yet. For some reason, this period is connected to some of the more general forms of dementia, especially Alzheimer's. It seems to predispose the body then to create more tau and more, what are those sticky things they call? You're probably all seeing what they are. So, yeah, adrenaline now is what I was talking about. Thanks, I just noticed that. So, Harvard Medical School is looking for, has developed an anesthesia that holds your blood pressure higher, doesn't let it drop so far. Harvard Medical School has developed a protocol on how they can measure the amount of anesthesia you need based on an EEG rather than some other gross measures of what you need. Neither of these are in generalized use now. You ask an anesthesiologist and they say, well, they haven't been approved yet. And you ask them what they're doing to get them approved, and they'll say, well, that's not for me to decide. That's my boss who runs this company here. You ask the boss, and the boss will say, well, each of the people who work for me are independent contractors. So since they're independent contractors, they're not under our purview. So each of them has their own protocol on how to deal with people who have dementia. The point I want to make is almost nobody has a protocol on what to do different for people who have dementia. I next went to the nursing department and asked them what was their protocol in the what do you call that place? That place you go after you before you go into the general population. You go to a place for people who are really intensive care. That's the name of it. They said, "Oh yeah, don't worry. Our nurses are looking for dementia all the time. They're checking for it. They have a protocol they follow." Well, my brother tells me this because I remember very little of what went on when I was in the, whatever that place is called, ICU. Thank you. They ask you who the president is or where are you right now. Sometimes they ask you what day it is. Well, they essentially use the first 3 or 4 questions of the MMBT or something like that it's called. Who's the President of the United States? What county do you live in? Questions like that. My answer was, I don't know, or I'll get back with you later on that. Even then I was trying to cover up even when I was, the MMSE. Thank you all for filling in those things for me. And once I could mimic back what they asked me, I wrote it down on ink in my palm, President Barack Obama, Methodist Hospital. That's all. Then they stopped asking me any questions. And I tried to figure out what was going on when I was in intensive care. And the way I figured it out was that I'd been in an auto accident, because this looked like a hospital to me. And these people around me, my own family members that I didn't recognize, were people who had been in the accident, and they were just very friendly people, and they were just watching out after me. And I thought it was nice that people who had been in the accident weren't hurt. Just me, I was hurt, were there. And then for a while, I started to pick up on whatever happened to somebody else in intensive care. They had an intensive care where there's no rooms. They're just curtains in between everybody, and it's in a big circle, one big happy, ill family. When things would happen to other people, I'd hear what was going on, and I would assume that was happening to me. So when these good friends came, I'd tell them about what happened to me. This crisis happened, or that crisis. They'd ask the nurses would say no. My whole stay in the hospital was a combination of reality and my own creative mind, mostly my own creative mind. I'm a little embarrassed now at what I said to people and how I figured things out and how resistant I was to this or that because I was afraid of it when there was no reason to be afraid of it. That's all dementia. Now, what do I think hospitals should be doing? Well, they shouldn't be asking you who the hell the president is. That doesn't make any difference that you don't know who the president is, or what county you live in, or even what the date is today. What counts is that you have some appreciation and understanding of what's going on today. What is happening to me? I think that would be a better question. What's happening to you, Richard, than where are you? Because if I didn't say Methodist Hospital, sometimes I'd say another hospital because I didn't remember the Methodist part of it. They'd count that as a wrong, not as a half right. And they wouldn't go from what I knew. They would just point out that I didn't know where I was. So I think people have to appreciate the wholeness of people who have dementia. This isn't any different than any other place, any other situation. But they're at their weakest point in order to be able to facilitate that happening. They really need outside help. They need somebody there who says, excuse me, but Richard has dementia, and some of the symptoms of it are he has trouble understanding instructions, he gets things confused, and he doesn't always remember correctly. So could you take that into consideration when you talk to him? That doesn't happen. There's not that kind of empathetic level of listening to people. Nurses are very busy people. They're overworked in hospitals now. And I don't know what to say to nurses other than I don't know who else to turn to other than you. Doctors think they're busier than you and spend less time with us. And nurses still have that little bit of nursing in their heart, taking care of the whole person. And so I turn to nurses and I say, how to keep from going under. How to keep from going under. It's hard with slides that you don't know what the hell you're doing. How to keep from going under forever. Okay, first of all, never ever send someone living with dementia, symptoms of dementia, to the hospital by themselves. You just can't trust first responders to know anything about dementia. I walked down to my first responders at the firehouse here and asked them about dementia. One of them knew something about it because his grandfather had it, but that's about all he knew, that his grandfather had dementia. First responders just are not in tune with what dementia is. You need something in your home that tells people, I have dementia. Two, this isn't working real well, is it? Never ever leave anyone with the symptoms of dementia alone in the hospital. You know, it's scary enough laying in your own bed, or laying in a nursing home, or laying in an Alzheimer's unit, there we go, and not being able to understand where you are, what's going on. To do it by yourself without someone who understands you and is reassuring, and someone that you have some knowledge of from time to time, is just something that's, it boggles my imagination that anyone with dementia would be put in those. Third, you go speak to your first responders, your emergency room staff, your nursing staff, about what it's like with the symptoms of dementia. Unless they've had a grandfather or a grandmother living with dementia. Oh, it goes this way. These slides are a little unruly. They don't have any idea. Now, there's a fellow living in Tampa, Florida. His name is, Gary Joseph LeBlanc. He has convinced his local hospital, he was a caregiver for someone who had dementia in the past. And he's on a crusade that everyone that goes into those hospitals in Tampa should have a name tag that says dementia. By the way, I wanted to show you this name tag, what happened to me when I went in the hospital, because I went in and I was a little unstable when I went in. I ended up being this. This was me. I was a fall risk. Now, what does a fall risk mean? Well, it means whenever you go for a walk and a nurse sees you, they say, are you with somebody? And if you say yes, then they leave you keep on walking. It means when physical therapy comes to do some physical therapy with you, they send two people because you're a fall risk. Well, I don't know that we need name badges. I think we need something more powerful than that, although name badges are certainly a good fit. forgot this part. This is a really amateur job, isn't it? Here we go. I'm getting it now. Bring 7 copies of your current drug list with you to the hospital. Give one to the head nurse of each nursing shift, including the weekends, the ER head nurse, and any and every doctor who will take the time to read it. Include a brief summary of the major disabilities I'm living with growing out of my dementia. This has got to get into your chart, and it's got to get into the minds of the people who are treating you. And the only way I know of assuring that is giving them something to read, very short. It took them a week for them to get my drugs straight about what I take outside of the hospital. So I went for a week without some of my drugs. So I withdrew from my antidepressant drugs when I didn't want to. I withdrew from some of my prostate drugs when I didn't want to, simply because they couldn't get it straight between the ER, nursing, and the pharmacy, what drugs I had and what drugs I didn't, and the fact that I no longer could take pills, that they had to be ground up and put into my not my food, but the crap that they pumped into me. Secondly, I think everyone should have a name tag when they come in the hospital who has dementia. And on the name tag, it should say, "Hello, I'm Richard. I'm living with the symptoms and disabilities of dementia. I require your best empathetic listening skills," and a little bit more of your time. Place that name tag on me, put it on my bed, put it on the wall of my room, put it on the outside of the door, and put it on the bathroom door, so that everybody that comes in realizes that I have a different set of symptoms in addition to what I'm in the hospital for. Why can't I figure this out? Maybe it's because I have dementia, or maybe it's just because This is hard. Just try this at home. Okay. Hello. There we go. Now, I got another sign for you to put on the bathroom door. Because you need these people need these keys. On the bathroom door. Please don't ask me what day it is or who's the president. It's just embarrassing to me. It makes me feel uncomfortable. It reminds me that I don't know what the hell's always going on around me. And it's of absolutely no value to me to concentrate on that, especially when I'm in the hospital. Unless you're worried about Obamacare, I guess, and I'm not. Next, I need to live and understand what is and what will happen to me. Emphasis on what is happening to me. They have an obligation to tell every patient what they're going to do to them, but they have a special obligation to tell people what they're going to do to them in a slower, more open way when they have dementia. Third, ask me to repeat what you just told me. The best way to know if you're really communicating with somebody, if they really understand what you're saying, is to ask them to repeat it in their own words. Not repeat your words, but repeat it in their own words. Next, always introduce yourself and explain why you're here and what you're going to do to me. Pretend I'm your favorite grandfather. People assume that when they know you, you know them. Sometimes they use your name, but they use it more as I'm recognizing who you are rather than you recognize who you are and what's going to go on here. Next, if you're looking for some small talk, ask about my family that's in the room, my grandchildren, my friends and hobbies. please, please stay and understand this moment and today. Thanks, Richard. These need to be these things need to be up in your on a door to your bathroom, so when people come in, they can read them. Now, you may have trouble writing them down, although you could write your own down. You just got an idea that you got to write whatever it is you want people to know in addition to showing it. Otherwise, you run into situations like this. This was my chart. For Richard Taylor. For one day, they did it. And you notice I'm supposed to sit in the chair for meals. Well, I had a feeding tube in me 24 hours a day, so I would either have to sit in a chair for 24 hours because I was taking my meals when actually I wasn't eating any, or this is just something they put up for everybody and ignore the fact that I didn't eat for 10 days. I didn't swallow anything for 10 days, actually about 14 days. These things happen in the 9th best hospital. They can happen in any hospital. So, what needs to change? Well, it's just like hospitals are a microcosm of, you can, if you write to me, I'll send you a copy of my slides. I got a Word file of these, so just write to Richard Taylor.
Actually, Richard, it's Laura. We can upload, if you send me the file, I'll upload them to the website so that they're posted along with the recording of the webinar. And then everybody will get a link to that page and you can download it from there.
Okay.
So if that works, we'll work that out afterwards. Yeah.
What needs to change is anesthesiologists need to take responsibility for their patients beyond the few moments when they're pushing the plunger to bring them up and pushing the plunger to bring them down. Quite often you don't even see your anesthesiologist in the intensive care unit. The way that's going to happen is for you to meet with your anesthesiologist, not 10 minutes before your surgery begins, but a day before it or 2 days before it. Now, most anesthesiology companies draw lots in the morning to see who gets what patient. So you really can't meet early with your anesthesiologist because nobody knows who the hell your anesthesiologist is going to be, not even the anesthesiologist. We need to stop that. We need to ask them to assign an anesthesiologist to us, and because we need to speak and to meet with them. What can you do to make this change happen? You've got to get out there. It's just like anything. If we don't do it, who's going to do it? Who will take responsibility for this? Have you heard any of the national associations talking about delirium and dementia in a way that's proactive and suggests solutions to it? I haven't. Have you heard any commercials about it? Have you seen anybody talk about it? Everybody knows about delirium, but nobody is doing anything about it. And it probably has long-term effects on people. It certainly has short-term effects during a critical time of their life. And if they're like me, they'll spend the rest of their lives trying to figure out what the hell went on during those 10 days. So we need our caregivers to support us, but most of all, we need ourselves to go talk to first responders, to go talk to nursing directors, and have an in-service on dementia for nurses, especially those in the ER and those in the intensive care, because that's where you're most likely to catch people with dementia. We need to have seminars and people who in nursing homes that they understand what it is when they send somebody to here, how important it is somebody accompany with them and stay with them, how important it is that the person have a name tag on them that they've put on them that says, I have dementia, that there's signs around that tell people what it means when I have dementia. If we don't do it, who else will do it? So my plea to you all is to call your local hospital. Ask your surgeon if you've ever had surgery to, if you can call your anesthesiologist and use his name so that you get their attention. We just have to stand up and speak out about this matter too, because if we don't, we're sentenced to 3 to 50 days of dementia, and perhaps the rest of our life with delirium, and perhaps the rest of our lives with dementia. Now, who's got some questions or comments to say about this? Okay. Have you been following these, Laura?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I'm just coming back on now. Okay. Freda from Nottingham in England says, in our local hospital, there is a new group to understand and improve care of dementia patients. There is a specialist nurse liaising with local dementia groups to plan and implement better care. Well, in England, you're always 3 steps ahead of us over here, so that's, I think we can certainly learn from you. And if there is any kind of information sharing going on, if we can, find out who's doing this kind of work and perhaps use them as resources from here. I don't know, Richard, what do you think?
Oh, yes, you're right about England being 3 steps ahead of us and more creative. I think we need to have volunteers in the hospital, just like we have volunteers who speak different languages, and when somebody comes in and speaks Korean or Caucasian or Hindi, they call that person and say, could you come in and help us? We should have people who are either trained or have life experience with dementia, and the hospital should call those people in. I have a good friend who runs Lakeview Ranch up in Minnesota, and when they have somebody new come in, they have a volunteer who comes in, sleeps in the room with this person for a week to try to transition them into the new community. Well, we need someone who's willing to volunteer, perhaps not to sleep in our rooms, but to spend a good deal of the time with us and to stay with us. And I think we can do that through existing volunteers.
Pat Stacy Cohen has, there's a website on Vanderbilt delirium. That would be a good resource. So I wrote that down, and we can take a look at that later on.
This is Gary's email address again. I'll send it to you. What he's done in his hospitals is he's created a name band. I don't know what color it is. It might be purple. For everyone who has dementia who comes in. But I'm saying, just telling people you have dementia, you might as well say, I have 3 feet. People will look to see look at your 3 feet and then just treat you as if you had 2 feet. So we need more information and people that have more information than just the wristbands. But it's certainly been a big accomplishment of his to get the hospitals to come up with the wristbands.
Mm-hmm. Al Power wrote, let me see, just find it again here. He said some preventatives for delirium and also for minimizing the impact on a person's dementia after a post-hospital visit are minimizing medications, discontinuing lines as soon as possible, minimizing wake-ups at night, getting out of bed, etc. Good evidence for all of these. Yeah, the wake-ups, you're woken up every hour for one thing or another. You get terrible sleep there. That's got to have a big impact. Yeah. Thanks, Al. Pat Stacy Cohen has also said NICHE, N-I-C-H-E, which also stands for Nursing Improving Care of Healthcare System Elders. That's a website that has a lot of stuff. So I'll write that down as well. Pat, thank you. Frida, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that contact. That would be great. Diane from Palm Valley Rehab. She's spoken in 3 hospitals in Phoenix about dementia to case managers, nurses, social workers, but not to doctors. She said it's hard to get into the hospitals if you don't have a connection. So she had a connection to make that happen in 3 hospitals, but now she doesn't.
The trick is finding somebody who has a family member, if it's an administrator or a staff member in the hospital or an employee of the hospital. That's a good way to get in, is through someone who has someone with dementia. Another idea I just had is churches should volunteer for this. Why don't you go to your church and say, why don't we be the Dementia Help Center for our local hospital? And we're going to get together 5 or 6 or 10 people who are retired and have some time, train them in dementia care and what dementia is, and make them available to the local hospital. That would work in smaller communities, I think.
Diane also says, how do we educate doctors when they don't receive an education in medical school? It boggles my mind that they don't learn anything about dementia in med school. It seems to be pretty much across the board.
But that's an explanation for their ignorance, not an excuse. Right. And oftentimes they use it as an excuse. Well, there is I read the other day that when you finish medical school, there's 3 times more to know than you know, because it's medical knowledge advances that quickly. So you learn everything there is to learn, and then you graduate, and the day you graduate, you got 3 times more to learn than what you learned in medical school. So that's an explanation for why I don't know much about dementia, but it's not an excuse. And I've said that right to doctors' faces. Because you can't give them any wiggle room with this stuff. This is too important an element of care for too many of their patients. We're not talking about some tsetse fly from the darkest parts of Africa. We're talking about something that probably almost 50% of their practice is dealing with the symptoms of this.
Richard, I remember, I think it was last year or maybe a couple of years ago, that Norman McNamara in England, who has Lewy body dementia, he was working on a project, contributing to a project where the hospitals put together, or a hospital put together a booklet, a pamphlet, which provided space for the patient and the patient's family to write in information about, similar to the types of information that you posted. I thought that was kind of a neat idea, and if I find a link again, I'll post it on our resources along with the other resources that people have been posting here in the chat box. But the reason I wanted to point that out is because I really like how you took it a step further and you printed it out and suggest that people stick it on their wall and maybe even hand it so that it's there all the time. Because if it's in one little booklet, I don't know that anybody would ever think to pick that up. So I really liked how you put that up on the wall.
Well, and this is a trendy thing in hospitals now, to have a whiteboard in your room where they write things on it. That's what gave me this idea, to decorate the room yourself.
AJ Kipperly from Florida says that the Alzheimer's Association of St. Louis has a great training program, dementia-friendly hospitals, care not crisis. The key is getting hospitals to want to be dementia-friendly. Sure, what is the incentive for them to be dementia-friendly? I'll just write that down as well. Here, St. Louis chapter.
Well, the incentive is they're given more ethically appropriate treatment to people in need. They're treating more of the person's need. They're treating the need that they are treating. They're doing it in a humane and individualized way. You shouldn't have to sell a hospital on how to treat their patients the way they deserve to be treated. But you do. So again, look for somebody who's got dementia in their family. That's the door opener.
You know, I come in contact with friends and other caregivers, and when I ask them to tell their story about their parent with dementia or whomever in their family has dementia, quite often it starts off with, well, my mother was in the hospital and, you know, my mother fell and broke her hip and she went to the hospital and, you know, and then what follows afterwards, it's not just delirium. It might have started with delirium, but there's a definite progression of dementia, but that's where the symptoms first started, is after a visit to the hospital. So when you commented on that, Richard, that struck a chord with me. Have you heard of that before? Has anybody heard about dementia starting, you know, people's stories? My mother went to the hospital and it all started. Is there a correlation there? Yeah, Richard?
I saw it in my grandmother who broke her hip. And they blame it all on the surgery and, well, she never recovered from the surgery. No, she never recovered from the anesthesia. Let's get that clear. Because until they take responsibility for that syndrome that lives on in us, no one is going to do anything about it, because they hang on firmly to their ability to control it, but they don't want to hang on to any of the side effects of it.
Okay, we have a very specific question here from Janet in Paradise Valley, Arizona. She says, any thoughts for helping my brother-in-law with accepting that he's struggling with dementia? He had surgery for a brain tumor 5 years ago and has had seizures since then, which have made him a fall risk. He's had several falls and is now in SNUF recovering, but is also showing signs of dementia and just wants to go home. Would you advise showing the recording of the webinar to him? My sister-in-law is faced with the fact that her husband may not be able to come home and is contemplating moving him into a memory care community. Any thoughts? Wow, that's a big one, Janet. That's a lot for your family to deal with.
Yes. I think often the reason people are resistant is not because they don't know. It's because they do know, but they know they have misinformation. They have fears. They have the stigmas inside of them. So it's more, I think the solution is more creating a climate of openness to talk about what those things are, what are the objections to this, than they are just showing somebody a tape of somebody talking about it. It's not a matter, I don't think, of having more information. It's being more open about what information you do have. And it's not a matter about having somebody else solve this problem. It's a matter of us as a family addressing this problem and being open about it with both with the person who has a problem and with the rest of the family. I lost you, Laura. Your lips moved, but
there. Okay. I don't know what happened. Oh, you might be back. Try talking now.
Yeah, I'm okay.
There you are.
Are you okay?
Yeah, we're good now. So you're saying to talk about it as a family, to create an atmosphere of openness where the family can talk about his symptoms and...
Yes, I run into this all the time, and I saw it in my own family. Our response to my Alzheimer's was, we'll wait till we cross those bridges when we come to them. Well, he might as well said, let's not talk about it until it hits us in the face. If ever there is a time for your family to be open and to open themselves to each other, it's certainly when one of you have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Everything has changed. We can't use the past as an excuse for not changing in the present, and most of us do. well, I've never liked my father, or he never liked me. Well, this is the time for you to reconcile with your father, because your father needs you, and you need your dad. It's the time to open up. And unfortunately, for most families, that's much easier said than done, because you're talking about years and years of, well, we don't talk about that, or when we do talk about it, it just makes everybody mad. Sometimes we need professional help, I think. We need a social worker. We need somebody from the Alzheimer's Association, maybe somebody from our caregivers group to come in and facilitate these conversations. But we certainly need to be more open.
Okay, I'm getting real echo in my headphones. Oh, I apologize if my microphone is bad. Ooh, that's awful. Um, Janet, I oh dear, oh dear.
Whoa, Laura, you're in outer space. Maybe this is a good time to say, how have I goodbye?